All right, everyone. Well, happy Friday. It's been a long week. I'm sure it's been a long week for you, and ready for a little bit of downtime this weekend, hopefully. Just to say, I'm so excited that you're here today. This is the first time that we're doing a webinar like this across E3 districts, especially with principals and especially around recruitment and retention. So really excited that you all are here today. And just as for those of you that I don't know, which I think I know most of your names, I recognize your names. My name is Jill Nyhus, and I head up a practice here at Insight around recruitment and retention, and have spent a lot of time in each of your districts, although not lately, which has been a little bit sad. Because I miss seeing all your faces and being in your schools and just talking recruitment. But just to say, our recruitment and retention efforts have not stopped in the last few weeks. COVID isn't stopping us. And it's awesome to see how all E3 districts are all hands on deck when it comes to recruitment and retention. So as we begin today, one is would love for you, as the session goes on, please feel free to use the chat box to add your questions. We're going to leave our cameras off for now, but in a minute, you're going to turn your cameras back on for a little moment. And then just keep your audio muted, just in case there's any kind of fun background noise. In our last session, we had someone walking with their pajamas in the background, having a whole conversation. So so we're just going to keep our audio off for right now. The other thing I'd love for you to do, those of you that are tweeters, would love for you to tweet about this session, any new learning. Feel free to use Instagram or Facebook or even TikTok. I know Chris Gerald's, you have a TikTok account. And so, all the young people are on there. So if you're not on there, you got to check it out. It's a really fun platform. But here are the hashtags to use. Might want to take a quick picture or screen grab, but would love to see you just share out what your new learning is from the session today. All right. What we're going to do right now before we begin, because we're all looking fresh at the beginning of this call. What I'd like for you to do is to turn on your cameras, and we're going to take one big selfie, just to show how big our E3 network is. And I'm going to take a few screenshots. So fix your hair, smile, act like you're excited. It's so fun to see your faces.
Jill, I'm sorry, I'm on my desktop and I don't have a camera.
Oh, don't worry. It's all good. We'll have your name will pop up. So, all right, everybody, let's do, I'm going to take a couple screen grabs because we're across two screens. There are, how many people are in this session? I guess I should know that. Of course, it's being blocked here. 38 people. So we got a lot of people in here. All right, so give it your big smile. 1, 2, 3. All right, that was fun. So you'll probably see that on the world of social media. In terms of context today, as you know, you're all part of the E3 network from across these 4 states, and it's awesome to see all 5 districts represented on here today, and just really excited about the new learning that we're going to do today together to just continue the momentum that we have around recruitment and retention. Just to say, all of your districts, I'm proud to say, are doing virtual recruitment events. We just got off a great coffee chat in Marlboro. We had over 50 people on the call, and we even used the Zoom breakout sessions. So if those of you that haven't done the Zoom breakouts, I got some lessons learned, but it worked beautifully. And then I know Decatur, you did yours a couple days ago. It was awesome. Had representation from across the district on the call talking about the great place of Decatur. And then last week we had April 16th. Was it last week? Yeah, I guess it was last week. We had Marion, and Marion was the first district in South Carolina that was recognized as doing a teacher recruitment virtual event during this COVID season. So congratulations to Marion. And I know that Colonial, you've been doing these virtual events for a little bit. You did one in March, and I know you have more coming up. And then Gainesville, we got 4 on tap next week. We got 2 elementary and 2 secondary ones. So love the diversity of how each of these coffee chats is turning out, learning lots of ideas from you. And we are really leading the nation in terms of this work. We've got other districts that are coming to us here at Insight, asking us, like, how can we do that? How can we do one of those coffee chats? And just to say, I love hearing your educators' voices, especially your teachers' voices, share about their experiences. It's been really just encouraging to hear, just kind of speaking back about the great work that you all are doing as leaders and supporting them. So today, to set the context, we are, of course, going to be doing some new learning. If you know me, I love new learning. I love learning. I love breaking things down. I love adding new things to my arsenal. And so we're going to particularly focus today on retention. And it's really interesting time to be thinking about retention in multiple ways. I've started to hear that one of the big trends now is that we're actually not going to have probably as big of an issue retaining people this year because of the state of the world right now. And so that's encouraging news. The question is, how are we going to keep those new people that we will be bringing in? So when we talk about the system of recruitment and retention that we've been building across all your districts, these are the 5 characteristics, as you well know, that have been driving our work. And today we're going to particularly focus on the relationship-driven side of this work when it comes to retention, and the equity side. Because retaining your people, your best people, is essential, obviously, for the growth of your students. And so we want to do everything that we can to keep your best people. So a few realities just to ground us in our conversation today, before I have our awesome guest speaker, Emily. I just want to set you up with a few realities of where we are and why actually this conversation that we're having today is very timely. So first of all, as some of you know, as some of you that were in some of the NELW sessions in Atlanta, which seems like years ago now, but we talked a lot about Gen Zs and millennials particularly. And one of the things that's really interesting now is that this is the first time in American history that we have 4 different generations in the workplace. Now, I was corrected. I was down in Texas and I had a district tell me, they told me that, actually we do have all 5 generations, not just 4. We have all 5 generations in our schools. We have bus drivers. We have 3 bus drivers who are in their 80s. So I thought, okay, got it. So, but in schools, we generally have about 4 generations in our buildings right now, which is really interesting from a retention standpoint, because each of these generations has sort of different needs when it comes to their careers and their career growth. The second reality is, the headlines, we all know the headlines. I don't need to to reiterate them. Just to say that this, the next, we don't know how long this economy is going to be the way that it is. And everyone is speculating, but we just really don't know, but we know it's bad. And the good news is that we are in a profession that is generally pretty stable. And so we have an amazing opportunity to actually attract people to the teaching profession. And here's an interesting headline. And if you have your phones, feel free to take out your phones and turn it to the camera. And I have a link to the article here. Some of you that I've worked with we've already read this article, but this has been in my back pocket for the last couple of years. And I even said at NELW several times that we needed to be watching for a downturn in the market. Never anticipated this kind of downturn, but we needed to anticipate a downturn in the market because what we know is that we know a couple things about what happens to the teaching profession. The first is downturns serve as a window of opportunity for us, because we are able to get great talent that otherwise would be like, teaching doesn't pay enough. I have other opportunities that are bigger and better, supposedly, than teaching. But now we have an opportunity where people are thinking, teachers are working, teachers are getting paid, they have health benefits, and they're making a huge impact on kids' lives right now. So it's starting to put ideas in people's heads. The other thing to know, that this study and this article, or the study that this article is based on, is that about 50% of people, and this is true dating back to the 1980s, only 50% of people who graduate from schools of education actually go into teaching. So there's a lot of people out there that have that went through teaching programs. Maybe their certification has expired, but when they start to see a downturn in the market, they may be like, maybe they've been out of the workforce for a little bit, and they see a spouse who's losing their job, and they're thinking, maybe I can get back into the profession. There's a whole pool of people that I think that we have an opportunity to attract. The second thing that we need to be keeping in mind is that research has shown that teachers that begin their careers during a recession are more effective on average than those that are hired during, booming times. And especially those that are at the very top of the performance scale. So I think this is what's really interesting about the time that we're in, is that we have an opportunity, one, to really actually start to turn the tide on the teacher shortage that we've all been experiencing over the last few years, which has been really hard. It's been really hard. And I think, the bright spot in what we're seeing is a possibility to bring people into this profession and to serve our kids that that our kids desperately need. So just a couple nuggets to keep in mind. Now, the fourth reality in our conversation today is that, and some of you have seen this, and this comes from The 9 Lies About Work. It's a great book. I'd highly recommend it. It's a great read. And one of the lies about work that these authors unpack is that people need feedback. And we hear this all the time about, especially Gen Z and millennial generations, that they need a lot of feedback. It's true. They are asking for that. But here's what they really want. The truth is, people need attention. And at the end of the day, it's because we all want to be seen for who we are at our very best, right? And so today's conversation, really about stay interviews, is really getting kind of to the root of that. The question we're asking ourselves today, and I'd love for you to keep in the back of your minds, is how are you going to keep your best? How are you going to keep your best in a year, in a couple years, maybe in 3 years? Like, how are you going to keep them, or at least help them to grow within your district? So, without further ado, I would love to introduce Emily Beck. So Emily Beck, as you can see, she has a pretty nice long title. She comes out of the office of the Maricopa County School Superintendent in Arizona. And she and I met at a grant meeting in Washington, D.C. from the U.S. Department of Education. And she led this session, actually the session that she's going to present on today. And I was just taking furious notes through the whole time, and invited her to come and share with us about the work that she and her team have been doing. And Emily, you all have a TESOL grant as well. Is that right? Or TIF grant?
We're a TIF grant. Yep. Teacher Incentive Fund.
Awesome. So, we're in the similar, universe in terms of grants. And so what's been awesome is just to hear Emily talk about a lot of research that they've been doing around this concept of stay interviews. So without further ado, I'd love to pass the baton to Emily. And Emily, I think you have the ability now to share your screen. Oh, one more thing.
Thank you so much.
One more thing. I'm going to share one more slide. All of the information that Emily is sharing today is available in this stay interview folder. So if you take out your phones, hold up your phones, you'll get the link. You might want to text the link to yourself so you don't lose it. But I will also send it out by email. But the PowerPoint and the documents are all in this folder. Okay, Emily, take it away. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you all for attending today. I know things are crazy out there, and I know that you have a lot on your plates. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time to sit through some conversation today and just hear some of our experiences and kind of invest in your schools in that way. I want to make sure, Jill, can you tell me if my screen is sharing properly with the, not the notes section, but just the regular slide? Does it look good?
Yep, it looks great.
Perfect. Love it when technology doesn't disagree with me. Okay, so want to give you a little bit of information about me. I know you all got to introduce yourselves in the chat earlier, and I love seeing that. I saw lots of roles in there: principals, assistant principals, coaches, leaders, human resources directors, special projects. So I love that we have a diverse group of folks here today. And what we're going to be talking about is really applicable on any level of an organization. And so I will be using the context of teachers and principals, but don't feel like if you're not a principal or an assistant principal that it stops there for you. You can really apply this across any level of the organization, across any role. And I'll get into some of the different roles that we've experimented with and gathered some data from. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I am an Arizonan born and raised. I have tried to leave and I just keep getting drawn back here. I really do love this state. I don't want to rub it in for anybody if you're in a place where it's still cold, but it is sunny and about 80 degrees here today. So I'm definitely enjoying that. As Jill introduced me earlier, I do work for the Office of the Maricopa County School Superintendent. Our superintendent is Steve Watson. And within that office, I work on the Real Extend grant. And that is the last of its kind. So the TIF grant, there have been a variety of them. This is TIF 5, and it is, as far as we're aware, the last of the TIF grants. And so we're really trying to drive home implementation of things that we've learned throughout the years. And we're at the point where we're seeing some great successes with our campuses, and we just want to make sure that we keep momentum with that. And now would be a great time to tell you what great resources I'm digging into and devouring school finance books and insightful leadership things. But the reality is that the addition to my quarantine viewing has been the good place. So give yourselves a break if you are enjoying some television lately. I think it's a really interesting context that we're living in right now. And so I'm finally getting to start the show that everybody raves about. So if you want to stick in the chat box the names of something that you are reading or watching right now that you're finding interesting. It can be school related, it can be personal, whatever you want to add to that. And we can kind of take a look at that later and see if any of us are watching or reading the same things right now. And throughout today's presentation, feel free to continue to use that chat box to capture any questions or thoughts that you have. I will occasionally check into them. I have myself set up with 2 screens right now, so I'm hoping that I can kind of do it all. I will check into that chat box occasionally to make sure that I'm pausing or answering any questions that you might have. And then near the end of the presentation, maybe we can unmute and have a discussion, or you can surface any questions that you might have. So some of you may have been on the giving or receiving end of some of these things, possibly prior to COVID-19. During this time of physical distancing, my husband and I have celebrated both our anniversary and my birthday. And so these typical flower giving occasions were changed a little bit, and he still did a great job and had them delivered from Fuchs Co., which I highly recommend. You might be able to see them behind me, actually. But that's not why I bring this up. I took this picture at one of our favorite wineries in Temecula, California, which is where we got married. And these rose bushes I find so interesting because, as you can see in the background, there are these really young vines that have little baby wine on them. And these rose bushes that the winemakers plant at the end of each of these rows serve as an early warning system for wine country. They're afflicted by many of the same diseases and pests that grapevines are, though at a much earlier stage and more severely. So the winemakers plant these roses at the ends of the rows of the grapevines in order to observe how healthy they are. And then when a disease or a pest is present, they know about it in time to intervene and save the harvest. So if there are any other wine drinkers out there, we should all be really grateful for this early warning system, right? What are some of the other early warning systems that exist in our lives? The dreaded check engine lights. Let this also be a reminder that if you haven't started your car in 2 weeks because you've been staying at home, probably start that up this afternoon. Low balance alert. That's never a fun one to get from your bank. Low battery alert. That's never a fun one to get when you're in the middle of a presentation or when you're trying to live stream The Bachelor from your Twitter account. If anybody has ever seen the classic film Jurassic Park, this one may look familiar. The T-Rex warning system, very important, although the T-Rex wasn't even a fast runner. That's a total misnomer. And this one becomes really important, especially lately, from the CDC, the Health Alert Network. These are all systems that are in place to tell us that something is going wrong before it's too late to salvage. And so after today's presentation, you'll be able to add another early warning system to your arsenal. It's the stay interview. So at the bottom of your at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should be able to see a little emblem called reactions. And in there are like thumbs up and clapping. So give me a little thumbs up or a clap if you have heard of or participated in a stay interview. Oh, I see a couple of thumbs up. Great. So for some of you, this is going to be totally new territory. And for others, maybe this is going to be a great chance to reflect on stay interviews that you've conducted or participated in, or a good time to get some ideas for implementing something new for your staff. So what is a stay interview? There's a really big difference between a stay interview and a hallway chat or an observation conversation or an annual review. Put all of those things out of your mind for the time being. A stay interview is a deliberate, scheduled conversation, typically one-on-one with a staff member. And I'm going to ask you to put your sociology hat on for a few minutes and look at this grid here. So with a stay interview, you have the opportunity to tap into different parts of an employee's experience that you wouldn't otherwise. So during a performance review, it's a very top-down type of conversation. In a stay interview, some people like to call them stay conversations, or you can come up with something that's branded to your context if you'd like. But this is really supposed to be an in-depth conversation that aims for a deeper level of discourse, and it focuses on what that person's experience is as a staff member. So if you look at this image over here, and when I send out the PowerPoint later, this image is clickable, so it takes you to the report that it comes from. It's a Korn Ferry report on leadership that I refer to quite a lot. Experiences make up such a big part of this discussion. The teacher, so again, I'll use the teacher principal context. If a principal is conducting these with a teacher, or an assistant principal is conducting this with a teacher, so much of that discussion will center around experiences. We want to find out what surfaces when a teacher is asked about his or her experience in different realms, because it tells us so much about where they really are in this facet of their life. Because, let's face it, when we come to work, we are our work selves. And so much of what happens outside of work impacts who we are at work. And we're seeing that a lot in this new context of working from home. So even better time to really focus on teachers and find out what it is about their experience that keeps them coming back and wanting to return to that campus every year, or what triggers there could be that might make them think about leaving. Drivers is what I consider kind of the next layer of the onion. Rarely will someone say, hello, I am driven to engagement by X, Y, and Z. But you can infer from what they discuss with you what those drivers are. Almost everyone will start the conversation by talking about their students and how much they love their students, and their students are impacting their students is what drives them to come to work. But these questions, and you'll see some examples of them, aim to understand what lies beyond that. So throughout these conversations, you can take mental notes and you can take physical notes. Does this teacher reiterate how much he values his grade team and their collaborative work? Does she mention the desire to be a principal one day? Does salary come up a lot? These are all markers of drivers, and those are all things that impact a person's experience in their job. The next layer are traits. So if you have been with your staff for any period of time, you know them. You know their personality traits, you know their tendencies, their quirks. Maybe you know the things that help them really thrive already. Maybe you know the things that irritate them and cause them distress. But really, these conversations highlight those things, as well as creating a path for some of the less obvious or more dormant traits to be seen, because you're getting into that deeper level of discourse and you're probing into past that surface layer of answers. If the vast majority of your time spent with one of your staff members has been in the context of a first grade classroom, this might be the first time that you're able to identify an aptitude for adult leadership or trauma-informed care or something like that. And so these are the things that you're looking for. Finally, it helps you identify competencies. These conversations, especially when they're held annually and that environment of psychological safety has been established, can unveil competencies or skills and behaviors that you can use to help inform how you lead this person. So maybe you end up seeing a career path for them, or maybe you see how a certain competency needs to be developed in order for them to be more successful. And again, this is not related to their performance evaluation. This is you just digging deeper into who they are as a person and how they're functioning on your staff to find out what you can do to make sure that they want to keep coming back year after year. And you have to go into these conversations with a little bit of a thick skin, because sometimes, and really ideally, you're not going to hear how perfect everything is. You want to hear the positives. You want to know what you should continue to celebrate and what positive things that you should continue to make sure happen. But you really also want to dig into what the things are that might cause someone to leave. And then you would lose that really valuable teacher. So stay interviews are not, as I said, performance reviews. These are not team meetings or focus groups. If you wanted to do a focus group with all of your first year teachers and ask some of the same questions, that is excellent. And that can be a really great retention strategy, but it's not a stay interview. These aren't rounds or water cooler conversations or pop-ins or hallway chats. This is something that's a lot more deliberate than that. And please remember, this is not your time to share. You're there to listen, to empathize, to probe. Not there to give your opinion, and you're not there to defend. And that can be really tough. But if you go in with the right mindset, knowing that your role is really to just absorb as much as you can, you're going to be okay. So why stay interviews? This is a very proactive approach. You can identify possible triggers that could potentially lead somebody to want to leave the organization. And sometimes these things will be outside of your control. So maybe you learned during one of these conversations that your prized third grade teacher, who you would hate to lose, has a partner who's considering taking a job across the country, or perhaps they have ailing parents, or any number of things that could draw them away from your school that are outside of your control. It's still better to know those things on the front end, and opening up those conversations and creating that human connection surrounding those things can make that transition a lot easier. Can also give you a lot more time to prepare as a leader, to kind of begin to hand off responsibilities and to make sure that you're getting as much from that person and giving as much to that person as you need to during that transitional time. So it's proactive rather than reactive. These are also very motivational. Organizational psychologists have dug deep into the reasons why employees perform better and stay longer at organizations. And the overwhelming finding is trust and confidence in their immediate supervisor. Employees who feel heard are more engaged. I think that's something that we would probably all agree with. If you don't feel heard, if you don't believe that your opinion matters, the level of engagement that you're going to display at your job is going to be lower. And so these conversations are motivational and trust building because they exhibit your leader's commitment to improvement, especially when you're conducting them annually, because then it doesn't just feel like another flash in the pan, get my opinion and don't do anything with it. Because I know there's a lot of survey fatigue that occurs with teachers. And we want to make sure that these conversations aim for a deeper level to where it really becomes something that they know is an opportunity for them to be heard, and that something is going to be done with the information that they share. They're also super informative. You're going to get information that you don't have otherwise. So especially in the one-on-one context, people, and you kind of see, depending on the relationship that you already have with this staff member, you kind of see people begin to relax throughout the interview. They might start out with kind of canned answers, and they're kind of feeling you out and testing the waters for how honest they can be. And as you establish that rapport, you really can gain some insights into things that you might not have been privy to prior to these conversations. And we know that data does not equal insight. That's why simply conducting surveys and having your teachers select on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your job? That's data. That doesn't necessarily equal insight. And so these conversations do produce data, but it's insightful data that you can actually have takeaways from and take back to your leadership teams to determine kind of what to do with. So why not exit interviews? Just like Danny wandered the drive-in wailing over why Sandy left him, which, if we're being honest, was patently obvious. Employers too often wait until valuable employees are 1 foot out the door to find out what caused their departure and what could have prevented it. And so I hope that none of you have been in this position, but it is very common for a supervisor to be completely caught off guard when an employee who they thought was performing very well, who seemed perfectly happy, doesn't renew their contract for the next year. And you're left in a lurch. You're thinking, why? I wish I had known. I wish there was something I could have done before this decision was made. And that's the beauty of the stay interview versus the exit interview. I'll share with you one of my personal exit stories. It is such a privilege to work in this field, and I love what I do so much, but that hasn't always been true. Prior to working for the school superintendent, I worked in finance and investing. I was almost done with my MBA. I was working for a soul-sucking financial firm, and it became clear that that was simply not the career path that I wanted to continue to pursue. So I decided to tender my resignation with several weeks' notice. And on that final day of work, I had said my goodbyes. I had attended the requisite happy hours and team meetings with surprise cupcakes. I was excited to be done with that chapter and move on. So I remember waltzing into HR to drop off my laptop, my parking pass, my security badge, and I quite literally turned and had 1 foot out the door when I hear, wait, we'd like to conduct an exit interview with you before you go. And I had the biggest internal eye roll, sat back down and thought, why are they bothering to ask me these questions now? It's far too late for anything to be done. Is this just a box that they're checking in the HR checklist of what to do when someone quits? Or are they actually going to do anything with what I'm sharing? Do I even feel comfortable being vulnerable and sharing with them my genuine thoughts? Or should I just give them the canned answers about how we're not a right fit for each other? I did my best to give them honest feedback, but I couldn't tell you if that went anywhere or if it was just that conversation. And beyond that, the organization was not impacted. Exit interviews are post-mortem. They are given to people who have no interest in offering the type of valid and invested feedback that a current and ongoing employee can. So you get information, and in some cases, maybe you part on good terms, and maybe this person still is invested in the well-being and the health of the school. And so I don't want you to think that I'm like completely negative about this, but I wanted to paint a picture for you of why exit interviews are not the answer. It is not a retention strategy. So we talked a lot about why to do stay interviews, and now I'd like to move on to how. I'll give you 6 steps to follow as well as a process map and sort of a field guide in the link that Jill will be sending out after today's presentation. It is the process map kind of lays out a particular set of steps in a particular order. But if you find that things work in a little bit different order for you, or if the timing and scheduling is a little bit different for you, that's totally fine. I'd like to talk to you about what we've done as an example and where we have found success. But please do whatever you need to do to make these successful in your contexts. So the first thing you'll want to do is decide who will conduct the interview and who will be interviewed. Generally, I recommend the immediate supervisor conduct these as one-on-one interviews. but we have done these with assistant principals. We've done them with HR staff. And we've also done them where it's actually 3 people in the room. You have the supervisor or the person in the supervisory position. You have the teacher who's being interviewed, and then you have a third person who's there capturing notes. And that is most often the role that I personally have played, where I'm just sitting there typing away and capturing as much as I can about what people are saying. And sometimes that does help facilitate a little bit more in-depth one-on-one conversation, because it can be hard to have a deep conversation with somebody while you're trying to take notes and having some awkward pauses. So feel free to have a third person in the room if you feel comfortable with that. But I do really recommend that the person conducting the interview is somebody who's in a position of leadership beyond just like a grade level coach, because you want this person to have a level of influence at the organizational level that kind of sets them up for implementing some of the changes that might come up from these interviews. So who will be interviewed? On average, students with excellent teachers, so those within the top 20 to 25%, make approximately 3 times the progress of students with teachers in the bottom 20 to 25%. So let that inform who you decide who will be interviewed. Really, that top tier of teachers, those are the people who are irreplaceable. You do not want them to leave. So focus on making sure that you know why they stay. Also consider flight risks. Some of those people I talked about earlier who you know that there might be something going on, or that maybe last year they were hesitant to renew their contract, or whatever the case is that you think there might be a flight risk for them. Consider those folks. And then also consider developing staff who are really committed to improvement. So maybe the past couple of years, you've seen this upward trajectory and you really want to develop that person. They can be a great candidate for these interviews because they'll tell you exactly where they came from and exactly where they're trying to go. And you can already see that they're putting a ton of effort into improvement. Next, you'll want to communicate. So it depends on, I know I'm talking to a lot of people in a lot of different organizational roles. So communication has to happen on every single one of those levels. If you are in HR or district leadership and you're trying to implement these on your campuses, make sure to communicate very well to principals what these are and how to conduct them. Kind of drive home the points that I made earlier about what state interviews are and what they are not. Provide some training, provide some questions. I'll give you a question bank that you can choose from. Give them ideas about what this is and kind of what the whole process looks like, so that they go into it well prepared. And then also communicate with people who are participating in it. So the teachers, make sure that those teachers know why these are occurring. Drive home that this is not in any way punitive. This is an opportunity for their voices to be heard. This is an opportunity for them to engage on a deep level with someone who can do something about it, right? And in the cases where people are just really happy with the way that everything is going, then that's great too. You get to walk away from those conversations with a lot to celebrate. You'll want to anticipate a couple of different things: common anxieties and possible resistances. So some of the common anxieties that we've seen is that if a person who's never participated in this before or is not familiar with this process, they might feel anxious about it. They might feel anxious about how the information is used. And so what we do is ensure that they know we're taking notes to capture trends, but this is not something that's going to be used against them. It's not going to go into their personnel file. It's not going to be part of their review. All of the things that you need to do to establish the trust required for this person to be honest. Ensure then that this is an opportunity, not a punishment. And then some of the other possible resistances that you do need to take into consideration is maybe the immediate supervisor is one of the problems. Maybe the immediate supervisor is the one causing some unrest on that campus. And so will people feel very confident in their ability to go be honest with that person? If the answer to that question is no, then use a pinch hitter. Have someone else from HR go in, have the assistant principal go in, whoever it is that will be able to have these conversations in a really open and honest manner. That's who you want to put in that seat. So if that leader is a primary contributor to the frustrations, anticipate that and just try to navigate that in a way that doesn't kind of shut people down from the get-go. And like I said earlier, you've got to go into this. I say thick skin. That's not always true, but what is always true is that you have to be committed to a flexible growth mindset. If you go into this thinking that you already know all of the answers, it's pointless. Okay. So then you'll want to align with your staff. Maybe it's your leadership staff, maybe it's people who are conducting the interviews, but you'll need to decide what questions to ask and how many. I recommend 5 if you're going to be doing about a 30-minute interview. 5 is plenty. Align your questions with your organizational values. So this might require a little bit more planning because you don't want to just ask questions that will get you good little sound bites. You want to make sure that those questions are aligned to some sort of organizational value surrounding retention. So give some thought to that and consider what the organizational needs are. Are there really specific questions that you want to ask about because you know? So let's take, for instance, schedule. A lot of teachers talk about how they want professional development, but they don't want to give up their prep time to have it. So if you know that scheduling is an issue on your campus or in your district that people have a lot of issues with, then perhaps you craft a question around that to get more feedback. Instead of asking, you want to make sure that the questions don't center around people or specific events. You want them to be way more organizational. You're not asking them about their colleagues. You're not asking them about their evaluators. You're really asking them about their experiences and the processes that they've participated in. When you're choosing questions, it is critical to be deliberate and thoughtful about how those questions are worded and in what order you ask them. So for instance, we don't want to start with any kind of a negative facing question. The most common first question is something surrounding what makes you excited to come to work every day? Or what are the things that you look forward to most every morning before you come to work? That kind of thing. And then when you think about the schedule, I think 30 minutes is a pretty good sweet spot. Whatever works into their day. Some teachers like to do these before or after school. Others teachers do like to do them during their prep periods. But consider their schedules when you're asking them to do this, because if they feel like it's just one more thing on their crazy packed agenda, then they're going to come into it with a little bit of that anxiety and nervousness. So give them options. Make sure there's classroom coverage if you are asking them to come out of the classroom during class time. And then consider the cycle of the year. So we've found a great deal of success in conducting these around November because you can kind of capitalize on that spirit of gratitude before Thanksgiving, and it still gives you time to make changes before you reach contract season. That being said, we've been doing a lot of these stay interviews while people have been working from home, and that has been very eye-opening. Giving people the chance to be heard on that one-on-one level during these unprecedented times when things feel really tumultuous has been really, really great. I think that's really built some of the relationships between leaders and their staff members. So in a world where things are a little bit more normal, I think October, November is a great option. But I don't know that there's really ever a bad time to conduct these, as long as you loop back with communication and make sure that people know that their input did matter and that you're doing something with it. So if you do it in the last week of school and then they go into summer break, you might need to do a touch point at some point in the summer to make sure that they know that you're still going over some of the things that they said. And then finally, the analyze stage, express gratitude. You are taking time out of a very, very busy person's schedule, and you're asking them to get open and vulnerable with you. And so expressing gratitude is critical here. You can identify immediately, you can identify and reinforce some of the positives that come out of your conversation. And then you can probably identify some of the opportunities for improvement immediately, but I would caution you to not necessarily, don't make any promises in that conversation. Just because they make a suggestion does not mean that you are obligated to fulfill it. You're there to listen, to absorb, to empathize. Okay. A note on social distancing. So like I said, we have been conducting these online, and it's been really, really effective. So imagine this exact environment where maybe we're having a face-to-face, and somebody else may or may not be typing. If people are comfortable with you recording, then you can have that third person, that third role taken care of just by recording. But the opportunity to connect with people in a time when people feel really disconnected has been huge for engagement. And to Jill's point from earlier with regard to attrition, we may not see the same attrition that we have in prior years. And you may see people who are job seekers coming into this market for the first time. But the fact remains that keeping those highly effective teachers on your staff, highly engaged, highly motivated, is critical, because people are thinking about their lives right now. People are thinking about how they spend their time. And so spending a little bit of time with you one-on-one can make a huge difference.
Well, in the interest of time, I'll invite you to review the sample questions on your own. There's sort of a field guide to that we'll send out. Do consider as you go through those, what of these questions stand out to you as something that you would love to know from your staff, or which of these might not apply. And there's some justifications on there. So that's a pretty good document that will help prepare you for these. I want to get to very quickly some of the outcomes and data analysis that we did. Quickly consider the wording. This is a question we threw out. We said, if you could wave a magic wand, didn't really consider that from some of the feedback, we learned that while this was trying to just be like a creative and kind of casual, flippant conversation, there are many people for whom the concept of magic is not casual and harmless. And so we didn't want to risk that. And so now we just say, if you could change one thing about your job with a snap of your fingers, what would it be? Some people say that they wish they could teleport the school closer to their house. Like I said, some of these things are going to be out of your control, but the idea is to take the aggregate conversation and get as much as you can out of that. So our findings. How in the world do you take all of this very nuanced qualitative feedback and quantify it in a way that helps you do something with it? Here's what we did. We took total alliance data and created a code for each type of response that would correlate with overall job satisfaction. So, and there were a variety of different questions. So this is an example. This is everything that's coded in the 200s is a type of response that would correlate to teacher job satisfaction. And so we took some guesses, we listened to some interviews, we read some data, put everything in here. And then every time that someone made a comment about this descriptor impacting their job satisfaction, we gave it a little tally mark. And then so we essentially checked it off every time we heard it throughout the interview. So this number here on the left is the code. And again, this is aggregate responses from the total alliance. And then the actual feedback that you're seeing here is from one district. Then we totaled up the results and listed them in order of mention. So you can see in this particular district, colleagues are a huge impactor for total overall job satisfaction. I think you'll probably find that too. And then we chose to call out different types of PD. You could just do like one line for professional development, but we found it really interesting that people talked about PD in generic terms, saying that they really appreciated PD that's practical and relevant. But then there were also people who talked about the very specific PD that made a big difference for them. Special education, diversity training, project-based learning, trauma-informed care, that kind of thing. And so those leaders were able to take away from there, like, oh, I really need to focus on PD that's practical and relevant. For instance, special education PD for my special education teachers. And that's a very big retention, a player in that retention space, because you want to make sure that people feel like they're supported in their roles to succeed. And just because something isn't mentioned doesn't mean it's not important. In this particular district, nobody really talked about salary and benefits, which we found so interesting because this is a performance-based compensation grant that we're working on. And so we expected people to say, I'm here because I get this retention stipend every year. Or one of the things that makes me like this job or this particular role is that I get this extra bonus for being in the multi-classroom leadership position, that kind of thing. It didn't come up. So we all know that nobody goes into the teaching profession for the money, but it was just really interesting to know that those things weren't top of mind, which means that the system is functioning well. People didn't talk about salary on the positive side or on the negative side. Here's another example, and I'm almost through here. This is, the question is, are teachers satisfied with the job as a whole? This isn't a question we asked them. That was the internal question that we were aiming to ask. So as we asked the teachers these 5 different questions, anytime they expressed or made a statement about a high degree of satisfaction with the job as a whole, we tallied that up. And so you get responses to questions you're not necessarily asking, if that makes sense. So as we were asking about what brings you to work every day versus what PD have you enjoyed most this year? Sometimes in that second question, you get sort of this, you get a response to the first question, even though that's not the question they're answering directly. And so this is an example of how we coded things for this particular question. And so there were 25 total interviews. Of those 25, 15 people expressed a high degree of satisfaction with their job as a whole. And those 15 people made a total of 18 comments. Those 18 comments occurred across 2 different campuses. So I just wanted to kind of walk through what that looks like, because we found it relevant data to say how many people were talking versus how many comments were made. And these are comments like, this is my dream job. This is extremely rewarding. I feel good about my work. Versus this code 105, someone who expressed a high degree of dissatisfaction with the job as a whole. Fortunately, there was only one person who made one comment about it. And this person said, you know what, I'm just over it. Okay, so you got to kind of take the good, bad, and the ugly. Overall, we found out that we have passionate educators whose focus is truly on students. That was not a surprise. They expressed a great deal of appreciation for support staff. So a lot of the support that the grant provides, we found out that was working, and that's great. We learned a lot about recognition. The vast majority of teachers do not want a poster outside the school proclaiming them as Teacher of the Year. They would much prefer timely, immediate feedback that is private. And that's what we learned about our alliance. We learned a lot about what professional development people want, and we've still learned a ton about the pressure point trends. So I know that was kind of a whirlwind. I will provide more resources. Please reach out to me if you have questions. If you want me to kind of walk you through a mock interview, I'd be happy to do that. This is something I've become really passionate about in the past couple of years, because I'm seeing what a big difference it makes in teacher retention. So Jill, I will go ahead and hand it back to you. I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you again for virtually participating with me today. And please let me know how else I can support you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. This was really helpful. I really appreciate the data at the end, because the question is like, what do we do when we do these interviews? Are they just nice little conversations? No, they actually lead to, I think, evaluating the work that we are doing in supporting teachers. And so thank you. Really appreciate just the overview of the state interviews. And as Emily mentioned, in the state interview folder, which I'm going to pull up right this minute, you can just take your phones out and take a screen grab, or sorry, not a screen grab. Just hold your phones up, and then it'll take you to this folder. By the way, if you're interested in the how I did these QR codes, I have the link to the actual QR code generator, because a few people have asked me about that. So before we go today, I just want to leave you with a couple of announcements. And one is that we have the presentation from NELW on interviewing, how to conduct effective interviews, which a number of you participated in. So that is available up on YouTube. You just go to YouTube, search Inside Education Group, and you will find it in our gallery of videos. Highly recommend just taking some time, especially in this interview season, to just learn some new little best practices to just improve your interviewing skills. I will say that as we continue over the next few months and even maybe the next year or two, we're going to see a rise in the number of applications, which allows you to actually probably interview more people to see if people are the right fit. You'll have more choice. And so I think it's a valuable time to just really look at your own interview skills. The next up in terms of this recruitment and retention leadership academy, next one is at May 22nd. I'm going to lead us in a session on how to communicate in a way that really attracts and retains your people. And so thinking about how you tweet, how you write emails, thinking about how the information that you are sharing is landing with your audience. And we're going to take some best practices from organizations like Axios, one of the major media companies. Some of you might follow them, but they have this principle called smart brevity. And they do an amazing job of like being able to communicate a lot of information in a small nugget that really can keep people's attention. So we'll dive into that, and that's at the end of May. Continue to tweet out. A few of you have been tweeting out this session today, and really, really appreciate it. I hope that this has been a helpful new learning for you, and that you're taking away some information that you can use right away, even during this time. Before we go, I would like to do one more selfie. We had a few people join in who were not in our first selfie. So before we hop off today, I'd love for you to turn your cameras back on. And let's do one big selfie again. So thank you, people. All right, let's do, whoops, let me close the pop-up window. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick picture. All right, everybody take a big smile. 1, 2, 3. All right, awesome. All right, well, thank you for, did I get the second screen here? Let me get the second screen here. Hold on, ready? 1, 2, 3.